I've worked a lot of strange jobs in my life: security gigs at empty warehouses, driving junked cars across state lines, even cleaning out foreclosed homes that still smelled like the people who used to live in them. But none of them stuck with me the way this one has. I wasn't looking for anything permanent. After burning out in the city, I needed quiet. Somewhere far away from the noise and the lights, from people constantly asking if I was doing okay. The kind of place where no one cared if you answered. I just needed a paycheck and silence. That's how I ended up on a thread buried deep in a job forum. The listing was short. No company name, no contact info. Overnight watchman needed $2,000 a week. No experience necessary. Must be okay with solitude. Bring your own food. Don't ask questions. It read more like bait than a real offer, but I clicked. I was behind on rent, credit cards were maxed, and frankly, I didn't care if it was a scam. If someone wanted to kidnap me for $2,000 a week, so be it. I got a reply the next morning. Just an address and a set of coordinates. No contract, no forms, just a time to arrive, 6 p.m. sharp. The field was 3 states over, somewhere in the rural dead zone between Missouri and Iowa. The kind of place that doesn't show up on GPS until you're already lost. I had to print out directions like. It was 2005. Once I left the last stretch of highway, the world went quiet eerily. So, the static on the radio dropped to dead silence, not even the usual hum. My phone showed no signal, 10 miles before the turnoff. I passed one gas station, the kind that looks like it hasn't changed since the 70s. I filled up and grabbed a sandwich. The clerk didn't say a word to me, just rang me up and stared. Too long. When I mentioned the field, his eyes twitched, like I'd said something I wasn't supposed to. "You're watching out there?" he asked. I nodded. He just shook his head. "Ain't worth your skin," he muttered, barely loud enough to hear. Then he went quiet, eyes locked on the countertop until I left. That should have been the first red flag. But I just thought he was being dramatic. Small towns feed off superstition. A field like that, miles wide, untouched, bordered by dense trees, probably had 100 ghost stories tied to it. I'd grown up on stories like that. They never meant anything. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling something was off the closer I got. No birds in the sky, no bugs on the windshield. The corn was too tall, too still. Even with the breeze, it didn't sway. It just stood there. Motionless. At 5:52 p.m., I pulled up to the edge of the field. There was no gate, no signage, just a dirt path that led up to a small wooden shack with a floodlight attached to the roof. The shack looked old, but recently cleaned. The single chair inside faced the field like a sentry post. A flashlight sat on the windowsill. There was no bathroom, no cot, just a thermos of black coffee and a clipboard with a folded note. I stepped out of the car, and the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not quiet silence, the kind that presses against your skin, like the world was holding its breath. I picked up the note. On the outside, in tight handwriting, were just 4 words. "Do not look inside," and beneath that, in smaller writing, especially between the rows. The inside of the shack was cooler than I expected. No AC, just shaded wood and concrete flooring, but the temperature dipped like a cave. There was only one window, facing the cornfield, and it was wide, too wide, like it had been made just to force you to look out. I stood there for a moment, staring at the corn. From this angle, the rows looked tight, tighter than they should have been. I'd worked on a farm as a teenager. There should have been space to walk between them, for harvesting, maintenance, something. But these stalks were packed like teeth in a clenched jaw. Eventually, I unfolded the note. "Welcome Night Watch. Your job is simple. Watch the field, report nothing, leave at sunrise." Then came the list. Field rules: strictly ENF or CD. Do not enter the cornfield. Not for any reason. Do not look between the rows. If you accidentally do, look away immediately. The floodlight must stay on from sunset to sunrise. Do not let it go out. If you hear whispering, do not respond. Not even to say I can't hear. If you see a figure standing at the edge of the field, do not acknowledge it. If someone knocks on the shack door after midnight, do not open it. No matter who it sounds like, you may hear a phone ringing from inside the field. There is no phone. If you fall asleep and wake up facing the corn, do not move until you hear birdsong. At the bottom, in red ink, was a final line. These rules are not a joke. Someone will check the cameras. I stared at it for a while, unsure whether to laugh or be concerned. There was a small dome camera mounted in the corner of the shack, blinking every few seconds. I'd assumed it was fake, but now I wasn't sure. I set the note down and sat in the chair. The wood creaked like it hadn't been used in years. A thick binder sat on the floor next to the chair, labeled logs. Inside were dozens of sheets, each filled out by hand, all with timestamps and entries like 20 to 13 movement in the third row. No visuals. 102, heard low moaning. Did not respond. 347, saw figure, near edge. Did not move. Figure vanished at 355. Every page was dated, going back years. Different handwriting, different pen colors. Same job, same rules. Dot as the sun dipped behind the trees. The shack filled with that strange heavy silence again. I flipped the switch for the floodlight. The hum of the bulb buzzed to life, casting a pale, wide cone across the first 20 feet of corn. I had no weapons, no walkie, no cell service, just that one light. For the first hour, nothing happened. I sipped the coffee, cold and bitter. I watched shadows stretch across the field. I listened, but heard nothing. Around 9:30, I saw something, or thought I did. It was just movement. A flicker between the stalks. Not deep in the field. Right up front. Just one row in. But I didn't look between the rows. I remembered that part. I rubbed my eyes and leaned back. Told myself it was wind. Or an animal. Or maybe I was tired. But the corn still wasn't moving. Not even a little dot. By 10:45, the floodlight flickered, just once. A quick dim, like a bulb preparing to die. It buzzed louder after that. I stared at it for a long time, wondering what would happen if it went out. If the shack had a backup. If this place even had a power grid. I hadn't seen a single power line on the way in. Then knock, 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 dot. I froze. 3 slow knocks on the door behind me. Not loud, not frantic, just deliberate. I turned, half expecting to see the wind had blown something against it, but nothing moved. The knob didn't turn. The wood didn't creak. Just those 3 knocks, then silence. It was too early for that. Midnight hadn't passed yet. I checked the clock on the wall. 11:06 p.m. I waited. 30 seconds. A full minute. Nothing. I turned back to the window, heart pounding harder than I liked to admit. The floodlight was still on. The corn stood still. I forced myself to log it. 23:06. 3 knocks at door. Did not respond. After that, I stayed standing. Sitting made me feel trapped. I paced the room slowly, checking the corners. Listening for footsteps. For whispers. I knew how this was supposed to work. The moment you think something's there, your brain starts to make it real. That's what I told myself. Anyway, then, at exactly midnight, the floodlight cut out. A pop, a whiff of burnt plastic. The shack went dark. For a few seconds I just stood there, frozen in the dark. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The shack was pitch black, and outside, the corn swallowed every trace of moonlight. I couldn't see past the glass. I reached for the flashlight on the windowsill and clicked it on. A weak beam flickered to life. It wasn't strong enough to reach far, but I kept it trained on the door. If anyone or anything was out there, I wanted to see it coming. The silence grew thicker, like the air had turned to syrup. I waited, heart racing, expecting another knock. But it never came. Instead, I heard something else, whispering at first. It sounded like wind through tall grass, gentle, almost soothing, but it grew louder, closer. Dozens of voices, all layered over each other. I couldn't make out words, but I knew they were coming from the field. I turned toward the window, and then I did the one thing I wasn't supposed to do. I looked between the rows. It wasn't intentional. I was trying to see where the sound was coming from, shining the flashlight across the first few feet of corn. My eyes drifted naturally, and for a moment, less than a second, they focused between the stalks. And in that split second, I saw something. Not a shape, not a person, an absence. There was a space in the corn that didn't make sense. The rows weren't just tight, they were impossible. Too close together, yet somehow too deep. The flashlight beam bent in a way I can't explain. Like the light didn't want to go there. Like it was being pulled inward. The whispering stopped instantly. I blinked and looked away, heart hammering in my throat. The flashlight flickered, then steadied. I sat back down, my hands shaking. I didn't look again. I didn't dare. But something had changed. The corn looked closer, just slightly, like the front row had shifted a few inches forward. I blinked hard, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. I stayed in that chair the rest of the night, not even getting up when my legs started to cramp. I kept the flashlight on the corn, refusing to let my gaze wander between the stalks again. I didn't hear any more whispers, no more knocks, but I felt something watching me. When the first hint of dawn broke over the trees, the tension eased. All at once, birds chirped in the distance. The flashlight dimmed until it clicked off entirely. I stepped out of the shack for the first time in hours. My legs wobbled beneath me. The corn stood tall and still, but I could swear the front row had moved at least a foot closer to the shack. I checked the floodlight. The bulb had burst. The glass was cracked and scorched, like it had overheated in a fire. No chance of fixing it without tools. I went back inside and opened the logbook. .00:00. Floodlight failed. Flashlight engaged. 012. Heard whispering from field. 014. Visual anomaly between rows. Looked away immediately. I hesitated, then added a final line. Field appears physically closer. I closed the book, placed it back on the floor, and waited. At 6:03 a.m., a black SUV pulled up the dirt path. Tinted windows. No plates. The driver didn't get out. They just rolled down the passenger window and gestured for me to come. As I got in, I glanced back at the shack. The cornfield looked exactly the same, but I swear, as we pulled away, one of the stalks tilted, ever so slightly, as if leaning to watch me go. The SUV ride back was dead silent. Same driver. Same tinted windows. No radio, no questions. Just gravel crunching under tires and that growing itch at the base of my skull that something had followed me out. They dropped me back at the gas station where I'd fueled up the day before. The clerk was gone. Lights still on, door still locked. A plain envelope sat on the hood of my car. Inside, $2,000 in cash. No note. I thought about walking away. Seriously, just driving back to the city and pretending none of this ever happened. But the money felt earned, like danger pay, for something I couldn't explain. Like I'd stared into a void, and it had blinked first. Still, something gnawed at me, that thing between the rows, that WRONGNESS. So I drove back to the motel down the road. A one-story dive, with buzzing lights and plastic sheets over the windows. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that dark fold between the corn stalks. A place the light didn't want to touch. A space that didn't feel like it belonged in this world. And the field didn't move. I knew it did. Fields don't just shift toward buildings. Not overnight. I should have left, but the rules had said there were cameras. Someone was watching, and I had a feeling if I didn't come back, they'd send someone else. The next evening, I showed up again. The shack was exactly as I left it, though the floodlight had been replaced. Same model, same dull hum when I flipped it on. The logbook still sat on the floor, but there was a new page inside the clipboard. Amendment to field. Rules effective IMMDALYF. Eclipse movement between the rows. Do not investigate. Ignore it completely. The figure at the edge of the field may now appear inside the corn. Do not look directly at it. Do not attempt to take photos, video, or recordings. Devices will not function properly. If you hear your name whispered from the field, leave the shack and sit in your car until it stops. Do not answer. Do not look. That was new. My name. It felt personal now. Targeted. I sat down, trying to steady my breathing. The air already felt heavier. The field didn't look closer, but it didn't look farther away either. The first hour passed like before. Still quiet. Then I saw it. Movement not deep in the rows, but at the edge this time, just beyond the floodlight's reach. A flicker, like someone stepping back, disappearing behind the stalks. I remembered the new rule, do not investigate, so I sat still, but my eyes kept drifting, not into the rows, just to the edge. That's when I noticed it. A shape, not quite human, not quite shadow. It stood halfway behind the corn, like it had been frozen mid-step. Tall, thin, featureless. No face, no clothes. Just an outline where a person should be. It didn't move. I blinked, and it was gone. The flashlight lay ready in my lap, but I didn't touch it. I just logged the time. 21:54, figure at corn edge. Did not look directly, did not respond. That felt important, like the field was testing me by midnight. Something changed again. I heard my name, not spoken, whispered, from somewhere deep inside the corn, not loud, not menacing, just soft, like a child trying to get my attention. Jason. I froze. It came again. Jason. The third time, I stood and walked out of the shack, not toward the field, toward my car. I opened the door, got in, locked it, just like the note said. I sat there for 15 minutes, hands trembling, as the whispers continued. My name, over and over. Eventually, they stopped, just faded like fog in sunlight. I stepped out, looked at the shack, then at the corn, and, again, I swore it was closer. I logged everything before sunrise. 00:01. Whispering began. Name spoken. Moved to Carper Protocol. Ceased at 016. 018. Corn appears 6 to 12 inches closer to shack. That morning, another envelope. No driver this time. Just the money waiting on my windshield. But there was something new. Taped to the cash was a sticky note. Doing well. Keep following the rules. The next day, I drove 3 towns over. I told myself I just needed cell service to let someone know I was okay. But that wasn't true. I wanted to know who was paying me. The money was real. Crisp bills, sequential numbers, but there were no digital records, no tax forms, no contact, nothing tied back to a company. It was like I was being paid to disappear, one night at a time. I found a library in a town called Gilder's Hollow, population under 300. One main street, a single blinking traffic light. The librarian looked confused when I asked about the Field, Iowa side. She asked. I nodded. She didn't say another word, just pointed toward the microfilm archives in the back. Most of it was old news church bake sales, missing dogs, the occasional flood, but I kept searching the name listed on the job note. Watch site 103A. That was the only clue I had. Eventually, I found something. A blurry, 2-paragraph article from 1978. Headline read, Farmhand found, dead at County Line Field. 3rd death this year. The article mentioned a man named Alan Mercer, aged 34, Local body found at sunrise, with no visible injuries. Eyes wide open. No signs of struggle. No footprints. No blood. No weapon. Just ... Sitting in a wooden shack, I stared at the grainy photo attached. The shack looked identical to the one I'd been in. Same wide window. Same floodlight. The article ended with a quote from the sheriff. "These deaths don't make sense. We're advising everyone to avoid the field until we figure it out." But clearly, they hadn't. Back at the motel, I opened the logbook I'd taken from the shack. I know I wasn't supposed to, but curiosity doesn't care about rules. Tucked in the back was a loose sheet, yellowed and brittle, handwritten in neat cursive. Not an official log, just a letter. To whoever comes after me, if you're reading this, you've already seen something. Maybe heard the whispers. Maybe glimpsed the man in the corn. I don't know how many of us have done this job, but I know we're not the first. And we won't be the last. This field is old. Older than the roads. Older than the town. Some say it was here before the forest. That it grew out of nowhere and never stopped. My grandfather told me stories. He said the corn doesn't just grow, it listens. It waits. It learns who you are. The rules aren't just for your safety. They're a test. Every violation gives it a little more of you. I broke 3. After that, I started hearing my own thoughts in someone else's voice. You can quit, but if you do, you'll never leave. Not really. You'll see the stalks and reflections. Hear footsteps behind you in parking lots. It follows you until you come back. So if you stay, follow the rules. And whatever you do, don't try to burn the field. That was rule number 9, the one they stopped writing down. EMI folded the note and set it aside. I didn't sleep that night, not out of fear but because part of me started to believe it. The way the light bent, the way the corn crept closer, the way my own name echoed out of something that shouldn't speak. I returned for the 3rd night, just before sundown. As I approached, I noticed something odd: tire tracks. Another vehicle had been there. Recently, inside the shack, everything looked normal. Floodlight working, flashlight charged, but the logbook was missing. Instead, a new clipboard waited for me on the chair. No greeting this time, just a list typed, clean, cold. Emergency override field 103, 8th figure may now approach the shack. Do not engage, do not acknowledge, do not speak unless spoken to by a human supervisor. Ignore all other voices. If you feel an intense urge to enter the corn, sit on the floor and cover your ears until it passes. If you hear scratching under the floorboards, do not investigate. Log the time. If another version of yourself appears outside, do not make eye contact. That last rule chilled me more than anything else. Another version of yourself. Was the field copying us, or pulling versions in from somewhere else? I sat down, slowly, unsure if I even wanted to turn the light on. But I did. That night was different. It felt active. Around 10 p.m., I heard the scratching, faint at first, like nails across wood, coming from directly below the shack. I didn't move. Just gripped the chair and focused on breathing. It got louder, more frantic, like something was clawing up, not under. I logged the time. 22:04. Scratching under floorboards. Did not engage. It continued for 23 minutes. Then silence. Then footsteps. Soft, shuffling, just outside the shack. I turned toward the door and there I was. Or something that looked exactly like me. Same clothes, same posture, even the slight limp I'd picked up from an old ankle injury. But the eyes weren't mine. They were too wide, too dark. They stared straight through the glass and didn't blink. I didn't move. The copy smiled. Not big, not dramatic. Just a slow curl of the lips like it knew something I didn't. It stayed there for exactly 5 minutes, then turned and walked into the corn. No sound, no rustle, It just melted between the stalks. I didn't log it. I couldn't. I just sat there until the sky turned pink and the birds began to sing. When the SUV came the next morning, it honked twice, then pulled away without me. There was no envelope this time, just the shack, just the field, just me. I didn't leave, not because I couldn't, but because something had shifted inside me. Like the field was no longer just a job, but a gravity. Every second I spent away from it, I felt pulled. My skin itched. My ears rang. I'd see flashes of corn in my rearview mirror, where there was nothing but road. So I stayed. Another night. Then another. The SUV never returned. No more envelopes. No more notes. No contact. Just the rules taped to the wall, and the floodlight flickering above my head, buzzing like an angry insect by the fifth night. Something in me broke. Maybe it was the way the corn looked under the moonlight, taller, broader, more alive. Maybe it was the voice. It spoke just once, around 1 o'clock a.m. It wasn't a whisper this time. It wasn't my name. It was a clear, low murmur right behind my ear. It's time now. I spun around, flashlight raised, heart pounding. The shack was empty, door still locked, shadows still, but I felt cold breath on my neck, even though nothing was there. I didn't log it. I couldn't even write. I sat in silence for nearly an hour, clutching the flashlight like a weapon, waiting for the next sound, but nothing came. Then I made my mistake. The floodlight flickered. Again, once, twice, then it shut off completely. The second it went dark, the corn began to move, not sway, not rustle, move as if something inside was pushing it outward. I could hear the stalks partying, crunching, groaning, like bones under pressure. It was coming toward the shack. I fumbled for the flashlight, but my hands were slick with sweat. When the beam finally came on, I aimed it out the window and froze. The corn had opened, right down the middle. A path had formed perfectly straight, leading deep into the field. Stalks bent outward like doors on a hinge, revealing only darkness beyond dot. And at the very end of that path, something stood, tall, thin, pale as paper. Its limbs were too long, its arms dangling nearly to its knees. I couldn't see a face, only the suggestion of one, a stretched mouth, hollow eyes, antlers maybe reaching back like roots. It didn't move, it didn't speak, but I felt it in my bones, in my teeth, like a pressure in my skull that said, "Come see." I turned away from the window, heart jackhammering in my chest. That's when the door creaked. Not a knock, not a bang, just a slow, long creak as it opened on its own. I ran. I didn't think. I grabbed the flashlight and bolted out of the shack, straight for my car. The field was alive around me. I could hear the stalks rattling, shaking, whispering. In a dozen voices. My name again. Over and over. Jason. 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 I reached the car and yanked the door open, slammed it shut, locked it. The whispers stopped the moment I did, but then I heard breathing from the back seat. I didn't look. I didn't turn. I sat perfectly still, staring out the windshield, and then you looked between the rows. The voice was mine, not similar mine. Same cadence, same tone, same weakness in the left syllables I'd had since I was a kid. Then I felt the cold metal of a hand rest lightly on my shoulder. I screamed and threw the door open, tumbling out onto the gravel, rolled, scraped my arms and legs. But when I turned back to look, the car was empty. I backed away slowly, heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out, and I saw the figure again, standing in the open path in the corn. Closer now, its head tilted to one side, like it was curious. I turned and ran, not back to the shack, not to the road, into the corn. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe, a mistake. The second I crossed the threshold, the air changed. It was like walking underwater. The stalks didn't brush past meat, they shifted away, as if alive. The ground was soft, breathing beneath my feet. I ran until I couldn't anymore, until the light of the shack was gone, until the world was nothing but green and black and the taste of blood in my mouth from breathing too hard. Then I stopped, because I heard something new. Click, click, click. It was above me, not on the ground, above. I looked up. There were eyes. In the corn, dozens of them, glowing faintly, yellow-white, unblinking. Then came the sound of teeth grinding, like someone chewing rock sand. Something reached down, not a hand, a root, or a finger, or a thing that had once been part of something human. It brushed my cheek. I screamed and bolted in the opposite direction, crashing through stalks, ignoring the whispers, ignoring the movement beside me. Something chased me, not fast but steady, always just a few steps behind, never breathing hard, never slowing down. It knew I would tire before it did. I broke out of the corn. An hour later, fell flat onto the gravel. The shack stood in the distance, lights off, silent. I crawled to my feet, staggered back inside, slammed the door. I collapsed in the chair and didn't move until morning, when the birds sang. I knew I was alive, but only barely. There was no envelope, no car, no sign that anyone even knew I was there anymore. The only new thing was a note tucked into the corner of the window, in a handwriting that wasn't mine. Rule 10. If it invites you into the corn, you're already part of it. I didn't leave the shack that day, not even when the sun came up. I sat in the chair, staring at the path I'd emerged from, where the corn had split apart from me like a mouth opening to swallow. It had sealed itself again sometime in the night, perfect, seamless, like it had never been there. By noon, I realized something strange. I wasn't tired. I should have been. I hadn't slept in over 24 hours. I hadn't eaten in almost 2 days, but I felt normal. No hunger, no exhaustion, just a dull buzz beneath my skin, like I'd swallowed static. Then I saw headlights. A familiar black SUV rolled up the dirt path and came to a stop a few feet from the shack. The same one that dropped me off. The same one that abandoned me days ago. This time, the driver got out. It was the same man who'd first picked me up. Late 40s, quiet eyes, wore a brown jacket and gloves, even in the summer heat. He didn't look surprised to see me. If anything, he looked disappointed. "You're still here," he said flatly. "You left me," I replied. "No," he said, reaching into his pocket. "You were supposed to leave. That's how it usually goes." He handed me an envelope, thicker than the others, too heavy to just be cash. I'd opened it. Inside was a check for $10,000 and a one-way bus ticket to Colorado Springs. "No more shifts," he said. "You're done." I stared at him. "Why now?" "You looked between the rows," he said simply. "You weren't supposed to. That wasn't part of the plan." I folded the envelope and slid it into my jacket. "What is this place?" He didn't answer. Instead, he lit a cigarette and leaned against the SUV, looking out at the corn. "You ever wonder why they never clear this land?" he asked. "Prime soil. Flat, isolated. Could have been a gold mine for agribusiness, but they never did. Know why?" I waited. "Because it grows itself," he said. "Always has. No planting, no irrigation. It just grows." He flicked the ash, never taking his eyes off the field. "My father worked this post before me, back when they still thought they could control it, fence it, burn it, contain it. Didn't work." "Who's they?" I asked. He gave a small smile. "Doesn't matter. They stopped asking questions a long time ago. Now it's just containment, observation. Toss someone in for a few nights, let the field feed a little, then pull them out." I felt my stomach turn. "You're feeding it?" I asked. He shrugged. "It doesn't take much. A memory, a thought, a name. It just needs a taste to stay calm. And what happens if it gets more than a taste? His eyes finally met mine, then it starts growing outward. That's when I noticed the bulge under his jacket, a holster, gunmetal peeking out. I took a step back. So what happens now? He sighed. We give you a check, send you far away, and hope you never hear the whisper again. That's the deal. But I already did, I said. I heard it. Last night. He flinched, just barely. But I saw it. I heard it say my name. He drew the gun and pointed it at me. I'm sorry, Jason. My mouth went dry. You said I was done. You are. And we can't have it following you back to a city. Something changed in me then. I didn't run. I didn't plead. I just smiled. Because behind him, the corn had moved. The stalks parted again, silently, smoothly. The path opened like before, straight and dark-hand. Something stepped out. The man didn't see it. He was still looking at me, but I saw the moment he felt it. The color drained from his face. His hands trembled. The gun slipped from his grip. He turned, slowly, and stared straight into the rows. He didn't scream. He didn't run. He just walked forward, step by step, into the waiting corn. The stalks closed behind him, gone, just like that. I stood there for a long time. Then I picked up the gun, slid it into my waistband. I didn't take the money. I stayed outside the shack until sunset. Something in me had shifted. Again, I didn't feel afraid anymore, not the way I had before. The dread was still there, but it wasn't a warning now. It was a presence, like the feeling you get when you're being watched for so long. You finally stop caring who's looking. I went back inside and turned on the floodlight. It buzzed louder than usual, crackling softly like it knew something I didn't. The logbook was gone. The clipboard to dot in their place was a single sheet of paper, pinned to the wall above the window. Final night protocol field 103 AO. Are now permitted to enter the corn. You must choose to enter of your own free will. Do not bring metal, salt, or fire. You may ask one question. Speak it aloud. The field will answer. Once the question is asked, you may not turn back. I read the paper 3 times. Then I burned it. I used the last of my motel matches, holding the page over the wastebin until the flame ate every word. It was a test. Another manipulation. The field wanted me to believe there were still rules I could follow, boundaries, deals, but I knew better. Now this place didn't offer answers. It just waited. I sat down in the chair, placed the gun on the windowsill, and waited. At 11:58 p.m., I heard footsteps, not from the door, from the corn. They were slow, careful, like something was circling the shack. Then I heard breathing. Then, I saw it through the window. It wasn't the pale figure this time. It wasn't even a duplicate of me. It was someone new, a woman, maybe mid-30s, dressed in denim overalls, hair tied back, face pale, expression hollow. She stepped just inside the floodlight's edge and stood perfectly still, her eyes locked on mine. And I realized something horrible. She looked familiar. Not from a photo, not from memory, from the letter E, M, the woman who wrote the warning, the one who knew the rules better than anyone. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come from her. They came from the corn. It's your turn now, Jason. My breath caught in my throat. She lifted her hand, palm up, and pointed toward the field. The stalks behind her began to part. Again, that perfect path. Again, the blackness at the end of it. But this time, it was different. I could see something in the distance. A door, wooden, old, standing in the middle of the field, unattached to anything. It pulsed faintly with light, like a heartbeat. I stepped forward without realizing it. The shack behind me faded from my mind. My name felt foreign in my mouth. I walked out the door and down the path. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the air thickened around my body, trying to pull me back. but I kept going. When I reached the door, I hesitated. Then I heard the whisper right in my ear, "Ask." I took a breath, and I asked the only question that mattered. "What are you?" The answer came not in words, but in understanding. Images, feelings, a sensation that poured into my mind like smoke. I saw roots stretching for miles, feeding on memory and sound. I saw mouths in the soil, eyes on every stalk. I saw time unraveling people pulled into the earth like seeds, each one screaming as they bloomed into something they didn't recognize. I saw myself, not as I was, but as something becoming. The field didn't want food, it wanted stories. It fed on choices, curiosity, fear. The more you gave it, the more it learned you. And when it knew you completely, it rewrote you. I turned away from the door. I chose not to open it. The field shuddered. The path behind me closed. But I didn't stop walking. I didn't run. I walked through the corn, not following any trail, just pushing forward until I saw moonlight again. I emerged on the far side, miles from the shack. The road was empty, the air still. My phone buzzed in my pocket for the first time in days. Signal. I opened a map. I was 20 miles from the nearest town. I started walking. Every few minutes, I looked over my shoulder. The field was still behind me, still there, still waiting, but I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to be a watcher anymore. I was going to warn them. It's been 6 days since I left the field. I walked 20 miles to the nearest gas station, hitched a ride to a hospital, and told them I'd gotten lost while hiking. They bought it. Mostly, kept me under observation for 72 hours, ran blood tests, gave me warm meals and blankets. They said my vitals were fine, too fine, heart rate steady, no dehydration, no malnutrition, not even sunburn. The doctor said I looked like I'd just come from a spa, not the middle of a cornfield. They released me 2 days ago. I haven't slept since. Every time I close my eyes, I see the rows, not in dreams in detail, like a map burned into my vision. I can trace the path I walked. I can feel the soft breath of the field on my neck, and I hear the voices. Not all the time, just when I'm alone in the shower, in the car, in motel rooms with paper-thin walls. They whisper, "Jason," soft, patient, the same voice that called me into the corn, the same one that answered my question. I started looking up missing persons reports, just curious at first, but then I saw them. Names I recognized from the logbook. People who'd worked the same post, disappeared without a trace. No bodies, no bodies, no investigation, just gone, erased. I wrote everything down, every detail, every rule, every violation. I tried submitting the story anonymously to local news outlets, forums, YouTube, anywhere that would listen. No one responds. Messages vanish before sending. Files delete themselves. My email locks me out. Then my laptop crashed completely, like the field had followed me through the screen. Today, I checked into another motel, third one this week. I pulled back the curtains, just to get some air. That's when I saw it, outside across the empty lot. Just beyond the tree line, a single stalk of corn, standing alone, perfectly upright, still watching. I closed the curtain. I sat on the edge of the bed. I know what this is now. The field doesn't trap you with roots or vines. It traps you with memory. You can leave the corn, but the corn doesn't leave you. I still have the gun. I still have the envelope I never took. And I still have a choice. I could run, hide, keep moving until the whispers fade. But they won't. Not really, so I'm going back, one last time, to the shack. To the rows. To the door in the dark. Because there's something I didn't ask, not when I should've. And maybe, if I ask it now, I'll finally understand why the field chose me. I'll leave this story here. If someone finds it, don't follow. Don't look between the rows. Don't listen when it calls your name. Because once it knows who you are, it never lets go.